All right. Hey, everyone. How's it going? We have a special guest on today's episode. Actually, the one who's paying for it all. It's our CEO, Jerry, here. For those of you who haven't met Jerry, you've probably seen his co-founder, Bora, all over LinkedIn and Twitter going crazy on some of the Alum videos, taking some of the calls. But, Jerry here is really heading up the company on the product side, leading our dev teams, our designers, and our product teams. And he's sort of a mastermind behind the scenes here. So it's awesome to get him out in front and in the podcast today to talk a little bit more about Reacher, what he's thinking about, how we've been building. So with that in mind, Jerry, I'd love to kick it over to you for a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Sohan. So as he said, I've been a little behind the scenes. Bora has been doing a great job representing everything that we do. So appreciate having this opportunity to, speak what's on my mind. But yeah, I'm Jerry. We've started this company about a year and a half ago. I head up most of the product stuff at Reacher, and Bora and I started this company out of a house, your classic Silicon Valley startup garage type of story. And we've known each other for many years before this. We were both engineers to start, but I think we kind of evolved into our strengths where Bora has started the go-to-market side, and I lead product and lead more of the internal teams. And here we are, 1.5 years later, just finished the YC batch. A lot of funny stories about applying to YC, and this time actually, I didn't even tell Bora about applying, and we made a last-minute video and got in. So, yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, and for those of the listeners who don't know what YC is, what is it, and why did you guys choose to apply? I guess us, we're a little bit big for YC, right? We've sort of crossed a 7-figure ARR threshold. We found our product market fit. What was the rationale there for you?
Yeah, so Reacher was our third time applying. The first and second times that we applied, it was YC is obviously the best place to start a company, right? It provides the resources, the network, the founders, not to mention the funding and the subsequent rounds of funding that you get access to through YC. But when we applied for Reacher, we were quite a bit underway in our operations, making money, having a real team. And like I said earlier, it was just like a random Friday night. We applied to YC and actually A16Z's own accelerator program called Speedrun. And just took me 20 minutes to apply. I didn't tell Bora. Then we were on a business trip to China, and I forgot to tell him that we had to film a founder application video. And we got to the hotel and realized with the time zone difference, there was only 30 minutes left in the application. We had to go out to a big client meeting. I was like, all right, let's get in the room. Let's just there was no chairs or tables. We were kneeling on the ground, filmed a really bad video that somehow worked, piqued their attention, and got in. But the reason we applied this time was because, well, one, actually, we were debating not taking it once they gave us the acceptance. Same with A16Z. But the COO of Shopify just called me. It was a random number that came in, and I was like, who's this? And he was like, I'm the CEO of Shopify. I'm an XYC alum. And are you seriously not considering not doing YC? I was like, I'm just weighing my option. He was like, no, this is the rocket ship. This is the place to go, a generational company. Many second-time founders with 9-figure exits in their previous companies come back to do YC. Many companies with 10 million ARR or above, which we saw firsthand after joining. There were companies with 10 million ARR, multiple of them that joined. And it's what I think they see and what we see is that there's just a vast network of founders that you can chat about anything with. They give you insights, I think people call it alpha, right? It's years of knowledge distilled into maybe a 15-minute conversation that you can't really get anywhere else. It's people in the know, people that built products, scale companies, raise money. I understood how to fundraise from talking to another founder for 15 minutes. He had raised an oversubscribed $8 million round, started with a cap of 3, got to 8, just because he understood how to pitch his company, the psychology of investors, the psychology of how to speak, when to not speak, and distilled that alpha into me with just 15 minutes. And with that, we closed our round very, very soon after that. So these are the little things. They also brainwashed us into moving to SF to be there as well. So many reasons that I can go on about.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So the alpha, right, or like the distilled volume of information that you couldn't get from any other network is a huge value add. I guess like to phrase it in a different way, right? For people who aren't going into YC, what are the implications of not having that alpha? Like, what is the same trajectory of a startup who in one universe A went to YC and then ones who didn't, right, and didn't receive that alpha look like?
They did like an analysis of companies that applied and didn't get in versus applied and got in and what happened after. And it said that it really came down, the total value, combined valuation of all the companies was more or less equal. And my takeaway from that was YC invests in the founders, not necessarily the ideas. They know they'll pivot. It might be something completely different a year later, which happens a lot. And I think it's up to the agency of the founder to figure out their market, to figure out how to grow. And they make wrong picks on founders too, right? So the founders that they missed, it wasn't about their idea. They found their way and grinded through hell to product market fit and eventually built a very, very successful company. So I think if you are looking to build a startup, you're thinking about applying, I think their acceptance rate is like 1% or less. So let's say you didn't get in. I think it really doesn't mean anything, right? Like you can keep trying, or you can just say like, what is a company about? It's about building a good product and getting customers. And if you do need people to ask for advice for, one thing I really see a lot of people doing is building in public on X. It's like when you're showing your company's progress, no matter how slow or how little you've done, when you're putting yourself on display, people want to help you, right? They're like, look, this kid is putting himself out there, building, telling us about his journey and his problems. I'm an experienced VC or founder. More often than not, these people want to give back. And I think that's how you can get access to those insights, by just being public about what you're doing.
Interesting. Okay. I want to play devil's advocate here and play anti-YC, right? So I think right now in the ecosystem, right, for context for our listeners, there's a lot of new and emerging TikTok shop tech, right? So, Reacher is essentially a CRM outreach and gamification platform that helps you matchmake and enable TikTok shop creators to produce revenue for your brand, right? But there are several other competitors. Do you think like going into YC sort of puts you into more of a mind that you do need to pivot and made you sort of detract or change focuses more? Or, let's say you guys are the leaders, right? If you want to continue on the path and keep doing what's working, does it make sense to kind of flush out those opinions from other people in YC and just focus on the guaranteed path there?
Yeah, I think because of just the number of companies and the diversification of the partners' backgrounds and our industry, we didn't get kind of direct advice on what we should do for our specific company. Mm-hmm. I think the most valuable parts from YC are like how to hire the right engineers, the growth people, how to build a team culture, how to like find your kind of footing in SF, the place where all the tech happens, how to raise money, how to, I guess, think through the general principles of building a good product. So I think that's where the most value has been. But for our industry, looking at our competition, looking at what our customers are saying, that's where insights are gained by being on the ground, talking to customers. And, one thing that we kind of started doing is going to meet with our customers and just like, hey, what are you up to? What are you building? And what are your workflows? Can we just kind of shadow you for a bit? Ideally, I would have a job at one of these like agencies or brands just so I can understand what their problems are. And so I think that's the level of deepness you got to get into each industry. YC doesn't provide that, nor do they claim to. It's more like to know what to build, look at what your customers want. And I wouldn't even over-index on competition. I would say each competitor at this point now kind of has their own thesis on what the future of social commerce and what their tools going to be like. And I would say like the two other competitors I'm thinking of, those two are making a bet on building a community kind of as a marketplace, whereas we as Reacher, we're taking a bet on helping brands build community. So that's like one-sided bets. There's other competitors that, let's say, make AI videos, right? And I would say our bet is, we think AI has its use, but our bet is on creators, human creators. And the use of AI is to help them make videos better, make videos faster. So I think we're at this fork in many areas of our product where we're differentiating from our competitors, but we're going with our bet and then validating that bet with customer feedback.
When you're a CEO thinking of placing these bets, right, you have a whole company, several engineers, growth people sort of looking to you to figure out where the next bet will be, right? If you have all the tools like your YC network, your alpha, your competitors and the market are moving in one direction, what does like your thought process look like for making this bet of saying, yeah, we're going to help brands do this when everyone else is doing something different?
I think it comes down to looking at the entire landscape of tools, service providers, and customers, and realizing where do you make the biggest impact with the biggest outcome. Like, I think, let's take the example of AI video, right? Like, there are a million players building on the AI video field. There are the foundational model companies providing the APIs to AI video. And there are actually the video platforms themselves like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, creating AI content or labeling it as such, or a risk to their algorithms deranking AI content. And so when you look at a field like this, the amount of players that are in it and the regulation that could come around it, or the demand that your current customers have. Like, we've seen AI video work for some use cases, but for the type of customers that we're chasing, which are larger enterprise brands or brands who have a defined strategy and want to now scale with TikTok Shop, AI video is maybe not in their focus. And so after analyzing the entire landscape, it didn't make sense for us to pursue that. And so it really is about spending a lot of time looking at what everyone is doing, where your unique advantages, and avoiding where maybe you have a disadvantage.
I've also heard that, sometimes looking at what people are doing, by the time the idea has sort of been proved and validated, you're too late, right? What do you think of that? Because I think enterprise brands sometimes can be laggards in the tech adoption cycle, right? Like, they can come later. I know me, you, and Bora had a series of very interesting discussions about annual contract value and pivoting industries when we were going through Y Combinator together, right? And we were looking at use cases like content moderation, because enterprise brands were moving in a bit slower to adopt TikTok Shop, and put real marketing spend behind it, right? If you're navigating a scenario where these enterprise brands are afraid of that systematic risk, platform risk, their edge being lost very quickly, how do you know to still work with some of these players or take a risk when there are no signals yet? It's very tough, right?
Definitely. I think you're never supposed to have perfect signal when you start building something. And I think building a company is like playing poker, right? It's not, yeah, I know. It's not playing chess, right? Yeah. Is my point. It's not like every next move is determined by your previous move, and it's all deterministic. It's very probabilistic, and you are acting with the best information you have, making a calculated decision, and sometimes you're wrong, right? And it's about the long-term variance that proves you right. And I think the best way to do that is with product velocity. Mm-hmm. I think there is definitely a case to be made that you shouldn't just build anything that someone says, or build as fast as you can to validate. Things should have a baseline level of validation. But beyond that, you really don't, like you said, you don't know what's going to stick until you build it. Yep. And the faster you can build, the faster you can validate. Yep. Or when customers get a working demo in their hands, they're going to give you ideas on hey, this is how I think this should evolve. Or when you start building it, the ideas start flowing. It's where action is actually giving you that insight, and it's like poker. The more hands you play, the more you'll win.
Yeah. No, I like that analogy. And for those of you who don't know, I love poker. And Jerry and Bora always, make fun of me for playing it a little too much with some of the other YC tech founders, right? Maybe I should be focusing on work more. But yeah, so there's this theory in poker called expected value, right? Like when you make a decision, in the long run, how often more than not is this decision going to play out for a favorable outcome? And so sometimes when you're placing bets on like what to build and what to do, you actually might fail, let's say 9 out of 10 startups fail, you might fail the majority of the time, right? But if you get that one startup to fail, you're okay. One startup to succeed, you're okay with that because your implied odds, or if you do make it, are like 100x, right? So if you fail 10x, but you get 100x, you might take a minus EV decision or something that seems super risky, but then your upside is super big in the long run, right? So that's kind of what Jerry's talking about here is, if you make those big bets, it might seem like a risky play right now if you don't have those signals, but like the upside can be very big, even if you don't have those like leading indicators or signals right now. Before we dive into some of that philosophy you're talking about building MVPs and doing more rapid stage testing with customers, right? I'm curious, as someone who's in charge of the product roadmap and ultimately makes the final call, how do you navigate different opinions from your team? You have your co-founder, Bora, who's out here talking to people, but from a sales and partnerships and marketing perspective, right? Still naturally collecting customer feedback. You have yourself and you have the engineers who are focused on the core user experience and, fixing bugs and figuring out what to build, right? And then you have your designers who are thinking about the flows and, what really increases time to value for these users, right? And then you have other people on the growth side like me. There's all these different opinions for everyone telling you what to build. You can go and shadow your own customers, right, at the end of the day and figure out what you want to build. But when it comes to creating the perfect, if there is a perfect philosophy or making a perfect decision, taking all these opinions into account, what does that decision-making process look like for you?
Yeah. I think it's basically looking at the strengths and weaknesses, or basically the strengths and, let's say, gaps, you will, of different members on the team. I think, let's say you and Bora hear about something, there's an idea. I think what I would take with that data is like, look, what tech is feasible to build that, and what's the TAM of that product or idea? And I think you guys have really good answers to how many people will buy this, how much would they pay for it, and how many customers does this open up to in the next, say, 6 months to 12 months. And then if I talk to engineers and more of the technical side of the company, they may not have the context you guys have, but I think they excel at knowing what can be done, right? Like how fast this can be done. And if it's a quick thing that we can throw out there, it goes back to our previous point. Okay, let's do it with that baseline validation. Or how actually further we can extend this idea, because what me and a lot of the engineers are doing is like, we're constantly on X. X is where you actually find out about all the coolest products and all the coolest foundational APIs and releases that all these other companies are enabling developers like us to build on top of. So I think what the engineers provide is like, look, guys, this is what's possible, both in like a timeline-wise and also like, this is all the tech that's available. How can we use it to fuel the product and growth ideas that come from you and Bora? So I try to be kind of a bridge to fill both sides together.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's something that I want to work on too, is like when I present an idea, having empathy for the engineering team in terms of what's technically feasible to be built. I think like my first time working in software, I would like throw out these ideas, right? And I'd bring like anecdotal customer feedback that like wasn't validated, across multiple use cases. The TAM, didn't even know, like I might throw things out that we don't have APIs available for, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a big learning curve for me.
Well, the fact that you even say that's better than most non-engineers.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, because I think sometimes like for general sales and growth, right, it's about how can we increase like short-term revenue, right? Like how do we hit our growth goals? How do we close our, commissions? Not that, I'm incentivized to make a commission on one sale, right? I want to help you guys or help us do better for the company. Sort of going back to what you were saying earlier about, taking big bets and investing in things without leading indicators, right? Here's one scenario that I'm curious about your thoughts on, right? So what you're talking about is delivering early MVPs or minimum viable products of like specific demos to get customer feedback, right? But like in the long run, right, if you're able to build and ship something very quickly, there's probably 10 or so engineers in China who could build it twice as fast and copy you, right? So if you're curating a roadmap here where you get leading indicators of the expected value, but your edge is shorter, right? What about investing in something where there's no leading indicators, like some really, really deep tech, right? Where you know that if you invest in this, your expected value in the long run could be bigger if it works. You might not get that early customer feedback and leading indicators earlier, but it's a more risky play, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a CEO here evaluating these two product ideas in the roadmap, right, and you have the two teams telling you these things, what does your thought process look like when you're taking a risk or figuring out where to dedicate resources?
Yeah. So whenever I come across these type of decisions, I look at what Zuck is doing with Meta. Mm-hmm. So I used to work in the Reality Labs department, which is the one that makes VR headsets, AR goggles, all the games that power it, all the kind of like hand-side accessories that power it. And that division is headed up by the CTO, Boz. And when I was there, that division was losing $10 billion a year. I think it's probably even more now. And even as they made more advances into AI and building open source models and building their new apps like Threads, Metaverse has always been one of the core 6 focuses of the company as it's losing money. So you wonder, like, what's going through Zuck's mind, right? And he actually made this bet all the way back in 2013 when he purchased Oculus for $2 billion from like Palmer Luckey, who was like, Oculus was great, but people were like, $2 billion, really? And he made the bet 10 years ago, and he's still continuing to lose money into it because he believes that that's the future operating system and hardware that people will use, and that it's going to be as ubiquitous as like the iPhone or the Mac, because those are still devices that you need to hold, but a VR or AR is actually integrated into your life. Mm-hmm. And so he is, I think, in a genius move, just allocating the profits from his ads business into AI and into his metaverse business that he believes will be a 10 to 20 year bet, and he'll come out on top and own the whole software hardware stack. And so when I look at that, I'm just like, that's something only like a founder-led company can do. And this is something that only I think like me and Bora can actually make a bold decision on. But long story short is, you're right, like Chinese engineers can copy the basic features, but maybe less of the actual deep tech. And we have to build a profitable business on the side where that's actually allowing us to fund R&D for these newer, deeper tech. And that's 100% something that we're doing.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting because obviously we're not Meta, pulling in like billions of dollars a year, right? And so you're saying like to have this kind of like product decision framework, you have to be founder led. But if you don't have the money to subsidize it, then you have to make a calculated decision. But then if you want to raise money, you dilute your ownership and you become less and less founder led, right? Doesn't it seem like sort of paradoxical to sort of take this approach at an early stage when you're getting closer and closer, to the edge?
The edge as in losing control of your company, right?
Losing control of the company and losing the ability to keep prolonging that decision when or to get to the point where you can have that expected value in return, right?
Yeah. So I think there's many ways to answer that. One is the part about building a profitable business such that you don't need to tap into your reserves or you're needing more investor funding just to fund your R&D. So I think that's what we started with, a cash flow positive business that now we have some cash in the bank to do some R&D. We did raise, we closed a round. It's also about what you as a founder, the goals you want to have for your company. Do you want to raise a seed and just seed strap it all the way into acquisition, which is what Zapier did, and it's a great example to follow. But granted, it's only one of the rare cases. And do you want to raise a Series A or B? And at each stage, like you said, you dilute more. But I think it's thinking about even if I dilute, does that funding help me get to where I want to be faster? Does it actually expand my TAM such that even though my slice of the pie gets smaller, the pie got bigger? And lastly, it's actually not always about having control of your company. I think the fair way to say this, having now been on a side of a bootstrap founder versus a founder who works with VCs, is that there are definitely tons of cases where the VCs screw over the founders, kick them out, impose stupid terms on them. But there are also VCs who just are aligned and they want to help you win. We just had a lunch with one of our biggest single investor here in Irvine, and it was a great chat because it's like, hey, look, I'll never hit you up, but whenever you hit me up, I'll be there, right? We don't even need to do monthly meetings. We don't need to do calls, but in that 1 hour, again, goes back to the alpha. He distilled, he's like been an entrepreneur for the last 30, 40 years and distilled a bunch of just alpha to us, and we learned a lot. And I think it's about finding the right investors on your board such that even if you dilute, it's not about maintaining control. It's about how you can move together faster.
I guess like how would you know, or how would you know who is the right investor? When you were going around, choosing your investors to raise from and pitching investors, were there certain things you noticed while you were pitching or based on the responses and questions they gave that, kind of triggered like a spider sense or some sort in you?
So I think I'll separate it into good angels and then good VCs. Angels are just people, like, chances are not that they're not going to help that much or they're going to have the specific domain experience. But I think angels have been founders, right? Founders of companies that have exited or have gone through a bunch of shit. That's the type of angels I look for, where in the call, they'll share about like, wow, like I can see what you're going through. I describe some of the challenges. They're like, yeah, I did that, but like 10 times worse. And it's like, wow, I can just like hit you up about the rough days and just kind of like have someone to talk to, right? That's angels. I think for VCs, it's people that have done their research and have more of a thesis. Like I think if you look at a VC who invests just in like a gazillion different verticals, it's like, what is your thesis? Versus a lot of the great ones we talk to is like, hey, we invest in kind of e-commerce enablement. We invest in some platforms that we strive to be and learn from. And those are the ones we love to talk to because they actually have skin in the game.
So mutually aligned interests, values, a portfolio that's sort of like in the same industry, right? Like
yeah,
an ideal one would be like a VC that only invests in creator marketing SaaS. You know what I mean? That's how you know that they're fully aligned with what you're doing and what you're building. Am I understanding correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So fast forward, right? We raise all this money for Reach, or woohoo, we're rich, right? But now it's actually time to like get to work. I think one of the most interesting, periods for me is, I started off, consulting with you guys for a bit, right? And joined. I think it's been like about almost 4 months now. It feels like a lot longer, and we've been expanding the team, the core domestic team, probably by like 2 to 3x, right? So I want to understand, how Reacher was like just before that, and what was your, like how did you know we needed to hire, and like what did you look for in those initial hires?
There were good days and there were bad days, but I think overall we were fighting tooth and nail like most of the days.
Yeah.
And if we were to start, like it was just me and Bor in the beginning, and the first few hires we made were kind of actually just friends that wanted to help us out, like introductions from friends. They may not live next to us, they were like in other countries, but we didn't see them as like kind of overseas talent. We saw them as like, hey, these guys are literally the first people to ever believe in us and work with us. And I think that's like I think in the beginning we found a right balance that allowed us to grow fast. Is like your first few hires don't need to be in person, or let's say like have had experience in the industry. They're just down to roll their sleeves up and get their hands dirty and work with you and just grow really fast. And I think that was maybe the first 3 to 6 months of Reacher. I think then what that happens though is like it leads to sort of maybe some lack of stability, because again, they are kind of just people that like a team that you threw together. And I think like the next stage was about assembling a team that's one, in person, and then two, just aligned with your company on a long-term goal. So, like actually giving equity to them and making sure that like, look, we're aligned both short-term and long-term, and just working with each other every day in the office was a huge unlock there. But what we look for in like our first hires, I think that the trait that gets thrown around a lot in a company is just high agency. Working with a platform, let's say like TikTok, who has, let's say, API documentation that could be a lot better, right? Let's leave it at that. And it's like, how do you figure out what to get done today if nobody has faced the issue that you have faced and you just have to figure it out? And I think like the definition for agency that I've read I liked is, if you were stuck in a jail in a third world country, who would you call to get you out of there? That's the person with the highest agency. And I'll have to admit, like, Bora is probably one of the guys who just like, I'll call up Bora, right?
Yeah.
And then now that I look at our core team, I would call all of them up too, right? Including you. And it's like, these guys can just figure a way out to do something. That's the one key trait.
Interesting. So I want to like bring it back to a specific example, right? So we know my Akshat, right?
Mine.
Specifically. Your Akshat, our
Yes.
Akshat, my Akshat.
No, mine.
So Akshat, for those who don't know, is our founding engineer and one of the first, if not the first, like domestic employee at Reacher, right? And you guys started working with him when he was very new in his career. I believe this is the only job he's ever had, right? So when you're vetting someone who's, this is their first job, right? Like, how do you evaluate high agency grit for the startup? And, he's still here. Like, how did you guys hire him and figure out that he was the one to help you build this?
Yeah, so he was an intern for us last summer and left to finish school. And I thought that was the end of it. But he came back and, the rest is history. What I think I saw in Akshat the first day is that I told him to build this feature that it was email automations, actually. So Akshat single-handedly built that entire thing by himself.
Nice.
He built the backend for it, and I was like, oh, great. He was showing me on like his terminal. So, oh, look, this Gmail account is connected and it's sending emails to all these creators, and it's like doing a bunch a day, and it's great. I'm like, oh, cool, let's productionize it. Let's put it into Frontend for the user. He's like, wait, I've never written a line of front-end code in my life. I don't know how to do front-end.
Yeah.
But he didn't say it like that. He was like, oh, like, I haven't done it before, but like, I can try. I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't really give him room to like back down from that. I was like, okay, you can try means you're going to get it done, right? And a week later, he built a front-end. He was just like, yeah, I read up on some like articles, watched some videos, used Cursor, and like kept iterating, and look, we have a functional working prototype. And so that example of that feature made me realize he could do everything else.
Interesting. So I guess when you were cultivating your Akshats, like, potential, right, within the company, did you deliver similar instructions for different things to build in that way? Would you be like, hey, go do this. I'm not going to define it that much, but like, are you up for it?
That's how we do things for a lot of our features. I think the best engineers and designers can fill in the gaps themselves, and also it leaves some creative freedom for them. I think before you start a project, definitely write down which user does this serve, which core workflows need to be built, how many people are going to use this, so you think about scale before you design the system. Those things we all write down, but like, I'm not writing out your kind of API endpoints.
Sure.
I'm not doing your database schema design, and I'm definitely not telling you like which frameworks to use. It's like, use your best judgment, because we want to instill that level of trust. And I think what that's happened is like, now each person in our company owns a part of the portal, and they are the source of truth on that. And they built it in a way that like, you can see that it was their own creative freedom mixed into there. And I think that's how we'll continue doing hiring.
And you said one thing that I want to touch on a little bit more. You said they document the core workflows and the frequency in which that appears for customers, right? I feel like that's like a very like product, way of thinking, a very like holistic way of thinking and sizing up the market. Is that something that you feel like you've had to teach to the team to think about that? Because I think, I'm not an engineer myself, right? But I think when I'm thinking about an engineer who has context in terms of like what they're building, the scale, significance, the end user experience, right? If you're really painting the picture and showing an engineer, that sort of, I guess, like background behind their project versus not having that background, those two things are built very differently, right? So is that something that you're kind of instilling and teaching for your engineers? And if so, like, how do you go about doing that?
That's something I definitely do. And the way I do it is whenever every new engineer onboards, I have many conversations with them about the company. Like ever since Akshat joined, Akshat does the engineering onboarding, like GitHub setup, right? Like Azure, GCP access, all of those things. But then I hop on calls with all of them to say like, who are our customers? Who's the exact persona that's going to use this? We even go down like, this is a rough idea of what they do in a day, their kind of job profile, and what they would use your platform for, how long they would spend on it, and paint the picture of like where we are in this whole space and what the goals of that person and that company is trying to do, right? Like they're trying to, for example, set an automation and like forget about it. And then when it comes back, it should just be done. Because why? They have a million other tasks to juggle, and they're trying to hit quarterly deadlines to generate a certain amount of GMV, and they need this to work. And so you need to make sure that things are stable because the customer doesn't have time to check, or they don't want to go into affiliate center or whatever. So explaining the product and company and users to every engineer is something that is really important. And then also I think getting into more engineering is like, we start with a list of core workflows to build, let's say like 2 or 3. And let's say we know that only maybe a quarter of our user base would use this. But we have to design the system in a way that there's going to be 10 more workflows and 1,000 more users that use it. How do you design the system such that you don't need to do a massive revamp of the foundation when those workflows come? It's like it takes like senior engineering talent and really deep dive discussions on how to not over design, but design enough.
So that foundational engineering design, right? It sounds like there also has to be like business context, growth context, market context in terms of like what we're building and why we're building it. When you're doing that with your senior engineers, right? How much are you getting other people involved from other sides of the business, like growth and sales? Because I think there's pros and cons to it, right? Like sometimes too much growth and sales input could like overstimulate the engineers, right? And sometimes you might need someone like you to synthesize it, right? But in a startup, things are changing so rapidly, and what we're building next month might be fundamentally different than the next, right? And what we're hearing from this customer this very day, we might hear something that totally confounds our current, engineering thesis, right? What is that like, I guess like communication bridging you're doing between departments look like to help these senior engineers understand those foundational workflows?
The question of, how much do you involve the other sides of the company? Yeah, I think there's like a right balance to play. I feel like if just you and Bora talk to the engineers all day, like it's going to be bad for both sides. Like, there's going to be stuff lost in translation. And I think it's like before you join with me and Bora, it was like I would lead the engineering stand-ups, but then once a month, once every 2 weeks, Bora would join, hear what's going on with the engineers, or also assign importance to a specific project and be like, look, guys, if we do this one, we'll bring over X amount of revenue, and you just need to do it. You just need to do this much by this day, and this customer will be satisfied enough to bring over this many accounts. And Bora brings that level of context to the engineers, and they're like, oh, like if I do this, this is immediate benefit to the company, and how can I spin something up or like prioritize that over my other tasks? And so I think like our team's getting a little like big for that, but I feel like having that bridge where me, you, Akshat, and Bora need to be in a room and talk about like, okay, what are the short-term things to build and what are the long-term investments that we're still going to make, and be upfront with you guys about like, hey, this is not growth for the next 3 months, but for the next 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the way you said that made me think about this too is because like, let's say the frequency in which you're having these things makes a huge impact. If you have a once a month thing and suddenly this new order of importance comes in where the GTM impact, right, or the amount of revenue you could generate from this feature is so big, and you're reprioritizing all your foundational work that you're doing leading up to that, and that cycle keeps happening over quarters and quarters, you're sort of losing momentum in your foundational workflows that you're building, right? Is there like an ideal frequency at like a company size of where we're at that you think makes sense, where engineers can sort of stay focused but still receive context in terms of what they're building and why they're building it?
Yeah, we've like tried a lot of frequencies. I think the part about growth and sales team talking to engineers definitely should be less frequent, I think. And then for engineering, we did daily stand-ups for many, many months. And then we actually did, this is when we were working with a lot of engineers in other time zones, and I would do 2 daily stand-ups, one at like 8 a.m. and one at 10 p.m. And it was like start of your day, end of my day, whatever. And now I think the perfect balance that we've found is one product team meeting a week. That's just the product team. One product and growth sales team sync a week. And then many meetings through the week that is just the 1 or 2 people working on the projects with me. And so like daily stand-ups, I felt like lost the context. People are like, I'm working on this. I'm going to do this today. That's it for me. And it's like, what does that really even do? And if you want to deep dive into something, you don't have time to. So switching with those 3 types of meeting has helped a lot.
So why those 3 specifically in that order with those people?
Yeah, so the product team one is like, hey, look, this is what everyone is working on this week. So you kind of know what the company's headed at, what your kind of teammates are doing. Like this guy might have a really important project, like don't bother him too much this week, right? That's the product team weekly. And then product and growth, I think like we experimented with twice a week, but I felt like just there weren't enough new things that needed to be shared in the second meeting. That once a week at the beginning was a great cadence. And then the like specific project ones, those happen every other day, I would say, approximately. Because I feel like every 2 days is when like engineers will make a new breakthrough. It's like, look, I can do this now. We're like, okay, great. Maybe we can just ship that, right? So that's what's worked.
That makes sense. And one thing I'm curious, just to like pivot here, right? I think one thing that has sort of always happened in Reacher is we focused on building our technical teams and our product teams first, and our growth team second. And that makes sense, just being we're a product focused company. We're in YC Silicon Valley, right? I am curious when it comes to building your foundational growth teams, right? And this is something Bora can probably speak to a lot as well. What kinds of growth people do you bring in to the company, right? If someone from growth attends this product sync, but has no understanding of like why we document core workflows, or like if I suggest things, how do I consider the resource constraints or the overall TAM of this, or the opportunity cost of suggesting this versus that, or like, how much cognitive space this is taking in an engineer's mind when I suggest this, so they have no space to listen to the 3 other ideas that I have queued up next, right? Like I think there's a lot of spaces and gaps, that I've sort of realized as I've been doing more of these syncs, right? But you as a CEO, when you're looking at bringing in more senior growth people, heads, people with like 5 years of account executive experience, marketers, right? What do you think sort of is done internally to help make these people more productive, or select them beforehand?
Be like Sohan. Just, we hired you. You're a great growth talent for the team.
Well, I guess diving into that, when you guys were thinking about hiring me, just to use myself as an example here, like what were indicators that, this wasn't just like a little sales guy, coming in who's just chasing the revenue, and, has some sort of indicators that they could be more cross-functional with product, right? Were there any like skills, attitudes, ways in people speak? Would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, I think like just to frame it for future growth people, I feel like one, they should use our product a lot, and they should use just a bunch of products a lot. Like you should have every part of our product dialed in and be suggesting feedback to the team at all times. And then second, you should have an account on every competitor's product and just products that you look up to and be sharing insights. Because I think it doesn't take a product or engineer or growth, like we all use a million products every day, but the people that actually learn something from when they use it are the people that I want to talk to, right? So I think like growth people having a context of like what makes products good is really cool. And then second is like growth people who actually just tinker as well. I think there's actually a lot of engineering that needs to be built into growth processes. And like one of the things we were looking at is like, how do we enrich our HubSpot with more data? And it's like, if a growth person can just build that integration themselves with like a NAN workflow or like finding an integration online, like that shows me that they can tinker, they know how to build solutions, and they, like you said earlier, can at least empathize with the engineers.
So like what does that like tinkering and product usage look like specifically, right? Like let's say you have Sohan coming in here, creating accounts on both competitors you're thinking about, right? Are there specific ways you're looking at him using the product, or what kinds of like insights is he telling you that you would find useful versus ones that you would not find useful, right? Like things like I created a automation. Like if I tell you I did that or used that, like that's not particularly helpful, right?
Sure, in that case, maybe not. But I think I judge kind of like one, the effort, and then two, I think different people gain different insights in how they do things. I think what I said is about the extent I'll kind of enforce something. I think I look at what you report back. I don't really look at like how you did it, but it's like what you learn from it. If creating an automation, you learn something from it, great. But to answer your question, I think generally it's like using the product with intention. I think one of the reasons you have given really good feedback is you came from the agency side, you have experience with the brand side, and so when you use the product, you're like, I actually use this for this use case, and this is how I can get better. So with an intention, and like maybe that's what's saying anybody who joins the team that has had experience running the campaigns and from the perspective of our users, that's a huge value add.
Interesting. So like going like getting to those skill sets and those insights, it's pretty hard to find from like the general talent that you're interviewing. I'm feeling that myself as I'm interviewing all these hires. I think I went through like 80 candidates yesterday with one of our recruiters, just looked at their LinkedIns and their experiences. And, you know, I think Reacher's at an interesting point, right? Where before you guys raise funding or we raise funding, we had to hire talent based off of like skill set, but couldn't always get the salary or get the player that we really needed to get in that spot. And now what I'm noticing is we're going through a phase where we're hiring heads. We're hiring very, very senior people, right? These are very important because it changes the culture. It means giving up a little bit more equity than you would, you know, for a normal hire, right? Can you walk me through what your thought process is as you're sort of, you and Bora are assembling the head of engineering's, you know, head of go-to-market, right? And some of these other departments' heads.
Essentially, I think we want to build a really strong core team and reward them highly. That's the thesis. I think like we have always thought about building this company with the team that we grew with, and we want everyone to have good outcomes at the end. And so more equity given just means our incentives are aligned more, and there's more chance for both of us to succeed, as opposed to a huge imbalance. And it's like you actually just fucked both sides, right? And so that's like the core compensation philosophy. And then in terms of like who are we looking for, yeah, there's like a couple things. I think like one, the core team has to actually just get along at like a human friend level, right? Like you're spending like 12-hour days with these people, early mornings and late nights to stressful days to so that's all the downs, but it's also like people that you want to celebrate with when something is going really well. Someone that you genuinely share a good moment with, and you think you would know that they're not like jealous or something, right? People that you actually trust and connect with on a friend level, because actually we do a lot of like friend stuff as a team too. We just did an offsite
team bonding.
Team bonding in the Marin County, and we spent like a weekend in Airbnb just like hiking, even though the hike was way too long.
It's like what, like a 9-mile hike?
9-mile hike.
1,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah, for more like 5 people have never been on a hike before.
Your guys' form of humor there.
Yes, that's the team bonding I reach here.
But it was bonding. I did bond.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit of trauma bonding.
Trauma bonding.
But we were bonded nonetheless.
There you go.
You know, when it comes to selecting those head players, right? I think the biggest thing I've seen, you know, having been at multiple different companies in a shorter period of spans, is like these, you know, early stage founders, CEOs, and founders have a tough time delegating and letting go, right? When you hire on a head, someone who's really going to own a core vertical of the company, right, is going to have like very significant drawbacks if they mess up. That requires a lot of trust and a lot more deeper of like a vetting process, right? So I want to just understand what's going on through your head when you're bringing on a new head of engineering, for example, right? What are some of the things you're thinking about or looking for? Let's think about it outside of a technical standpoint, right? On a behavioral standpoint, right? You're giving up your baby to this person, right? What are some things you're looking for in the person, how they talk? When you're vetting them, what does that process and question framework look like for you?
So first principle I'd give here is to not rush it. Finding our head of engineering took like 4 or 5 months, but I think I was internally like anxious. I was like, I need to get this person in fast, but I knew I couldn't rush it because it's such an important role. So like, you know, to whoever is listening, if it's a really important role and it's taking you time, there's a reason. And when you finally find that person, the like time that was spent recruiting and you felt like it was wasted is not, because you found the right person. But specifically, I think it's like the interview process should be designed to get a sense of how they work. And so the one that we just found, we did like a 2-week work trial. I was like, look, I know you have a job. We'll pay you. We'll like time box the task for you. It's not something crazy open-ended. It's like, you know, there's a deliverable, but we'll give you actually access to like, you know, snippets of our system. So you can actually see like, hey, this is, first of all, like something you would enjoy working at, right? But then second, it's like you have a real problem. We give them a real project that would be used for the users. You see real data, and then you work with real people. You work with me and a couple of the other engineers. So like we get to know each other on like your interpersonal skills, definitely your hard skills. And it's like throughout that 2 weeks, you talk, you see the questions they ask, and you're like, and then I would ask the engineers I work with them like, hey, would you want to work with this person long term? And Akshat's been really helpful there. It's like, hey, there's feedback. It's like, this guy is smart, but I would hate to be locked in a room with him just whiteboarding. Like, I think I would kill myself, you know? There's been that type of feedback. And other ones is like, he's really smart and I really love working with him. Can we hire him right now? And it's like, it has to be super strong signal for us to say yes. And I think like, from what I learned, like interviewing at Meta was like, I had 7 interviews for one role, and everybody had to give like a strong yes. A light yes, people will question. A light no is like already just everyone's no. It's like one light no even kills it, and then strong no is just, yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
So it's like all the people that work with them have to be strong yeses, especially on the interpersonal skills part, because I think like all these like heads of engineering, when you're looking at people with 6 to 7 years of experience at least, their tech skills are going to be good enough. It's like, can they, 1, do their own work, and 2, can they lead the more junior folks, right? Like, do they have experience managing people, growing it from, let's say, 3 people to like 10 people? And then do they have enough like, I guess, empathy, but I don't mean it in like the feels way. I mean it in more like a really good of head engineering is like the umbrella that shields the engineers and helps them grow. Like someone that can see like, I can advance the careers of someone that can report to me, right? I see where their career path is, or I can shield them from all the bullshit that comes from like internal conflict, right? It's like, okay, I just got handed this huge project, but let me define it very clear for you so your life is easy.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're creating an early work environment during a trial where you're sort of assessing these characteristics in real time, right? In real time, if we were to work on a project together, what sort of language is this person using? How are people responding to him? Is there a positive sentiment here between teammates? I think that makes sense because even me helping Bora interview our head of customer success candidates, right? That has been like a huge experience for me because I'm like, these people probably have like 10 more years of experience than me, right? Like, I'm pretty sure they know how to decrease retention or upsell someone, right? That's not really it. So how do we learn that in advance? I think creating the work environment makes sense. Drilling down a bit deeper, when you're in this work environment, right? What are things that you sort of expect people to say or more common patterns you notice that lead to higher interpersonal cohesion, between these other more junior engineers or other engineers?
It's about how they give feedback.
Okay.
Like, I feel like we're all like AI models in some way, and we just keep getting tuned by the interactions that tell us, oh, that didn't go well, let me do it better next time, or that went really well, let me do more of that. And I think like being a lead, you have to deliver feedback up and down, kind of like immediately and directly. And I think that's what we got with this head of engineering. Is like during his work trial, he looked at our system. He's like, look, this part doesn't make sense, and this is how I think we should do it, and proposed a plan. I was like, okay, great. Like immediate feedback on hard skill stuff. And then second piece of feedback was on like how I led the meeting. It was like, I think you started off great, but at the end there was like confusion on what are the next steps from this meeting. And engineers were asking, and it felt like you were neither doing a brainstorm or a direct top-down decision. It was like somewhere in between, and engineers were confused on, so what should we expect? And I was like, oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And he gave it immediately after the meeting, and it's like, don't hold back because that will brew resentment. I won't even know what you're feeling like about me. And same with the people that report to him. If they're not doing good, immediately tell it in a constructive way. And I was just like, be specific, you know? So those are the kind of skills.
And when it comes to, those situations where you aren't able to directly validate those skills because he's talking to you, right? Like, let's say he's talking to other engineers. I know you said like other engineers would be like, I would want to work with him or not, right? But do you ever like look at Slack channels where you're in a joint Slack channel and he's messaging, or are there other sort of tests where like you do create that shield of bullshit for him and see how he then protects those engineers, and then downstream how he manages those communications there?
Yeah, it actually all comes down to like every single word that you type in the Slack does matter. Everyone reads it. You can see like how you're managing both sides. So it's still very early into this relationship, but like if we're gonna give example of Akshat, who has been leading a lot of engineers, I can tell that, let's say customer support reports a ticket and it's like the tone is like angry. It's like, yo, like you guys like fucked up. Like, why is this not working? Akshat will diagnose and be like, okay, it's our bad. I see the issue, but hey, like X person, can you please look into this part? And this other person, can you look into this part? And like in 15 minutes, let's have a huddle. And it's like clearly delegated who to do what, and didn't place immediate blame, and like got on a call to avoid the classic text message confusion of like, you always sound meaner over text than like over voice, you know?
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes sense. And I think I feel the same way too, where it's like sometimes we'll have like a tough conversations about people over text, and I'll be like inserting my opinion, you'll be inserting yours. But then I see you in person, I'm like, oh, it's good. We're all good.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So I feel the same way. I guess, one thing I'm curious about, right? Bringing in a head of engineering where you have a foundational team member who is not head of engineering, right? What sort of things are you thinking about when you bring someone above a core member like that? How are you looking at integrating them, making sure the culture is still intact? It's a very tough one, right? Because for me, if you brought in a VP over me, obviously I have like a very different personality than Akshat, right? I might feel like, oh, like, am I going to get laid off? Is this person about to, destroy my relationship with the founders? Like, like what's going to happen? So curious on how you navigate that injection there.
I think, like you said, in this case, there's not much I have to do because the people that I work with are super humble. it's made it easy for me. So I think in the more general case of like, let's say, someone who might not be as open to like another person cutting in between that line of command, I think it's like, actually again comes back to like the trait of humility. I think so. Let me expand on that trait and why I think it's so important. Like I think as a founder, you just get humbled every single day. You feel the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, but when you're like low, it feels really low because you're like, damn, like I don't know shit. And then you realize, okay, these are the skills I need to learn, and I'm missing like these 4 key skills I need to learn by next week, and let me learn them as fast as possible. And it's like, wow, like I need to do that every week. And I think like being a founder is actually just an equation of how fast you can learn, right? You're never gonna have all the skills you need to start a freaking company and employ in future hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's always like knowing that you don't know shit and you just need to learn fast. So that's why I think that trait overall is important. And then in the case of like someone entering above you, it's like, hey, maybe there's a reason, right? Like trying to understand like they do this thing better than me. They might actually help free up some of my time in doing these other things. And there's probably a reason why they were hired. And if not, let me go talk to the founder about it. So yeah.
So what if that person isn't someone who would go talk to you and confront you directly? How would you go about approaching them and then facilitating that integration process proactively in that other scenario, right?
I think that's one thing I've gotten a lot of practice is just like trying to have direct conversations, not mincing my words. I think it came from a trait where I think people think I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like it's very easy to see what I think, and it's very easy to read through me. So I'm like that in conversations too. You don't even have to like prod me to get to know what I'm truly thinking. And so what I would do is just have a conversation with the person that's under, and there's someone coming. I'll be like, look, like hiring this person, you're gonna report to him now. What do you think? Be real with me. And if they don't say anything, I'll even like suggest. I was like, well, I came into this conversation thinking you might have said this. Can you confirm or deny? I come to every meeting prepared with like notes and stuff, and I want to just go through each of them to confirm or deny, and I think that's how I do it.
All right. No, it's super insightful. I feel like we could still keep talking for another few hours, but I think I'm going to end it at that. Thanks so much, Jerry, for hopping on, and looking forward to seeing you on here again.
Thank you, Sohan. Best interviewer I've talked to.